Hey everybody, welcome to the briefing room. Happy Thursday. I'm Devin Dwyer in Washington. Great to have you with us. A lot to get to today, including the president's impromptu 45-minute news conference of sorts in the Roosevelt Room. He had a lot on his mind today. We'll get into that. We'll also talk a little bit about the rise of hate groups in the United States, a stunning new number you need to pay attention to that the FBI revealed yesterday. And we'll go up to Capitol Hill to meet some of America's youngest app engineers. Stay tuned for that. Our Lana Zak is standing by there. But let's start with the president today in the Roosevelt Room declaring that the Mueller report, in his words, is the Bible, and also saying that it vindicated not only himself, but Donald Trump Jr., his son, as the Republican-led Senate Intelligence Committee now wants to subpoena Don Trump Jr. to come back to the Hill. The president says he's surprised by that. Take a listen.
Mr. President, as you saw, the Senate Intelligence Committee has subpoenaed Don Jr. That's the Republican-led Senate Intelligence Committee. What do you make of that?
Well, I was very surprised. I saw Richard Burr saying there was no collusion 2 or 3 weeks ago. He went outside and somebody asked him, no, there's no collusion. We found no collusion. But I was very surprised to see my son. My son's a very good person, works very hard. The last thing he needs is Washington, D.C. He could rather not ever be involved. Remember, he said to me a long time ago when I was thinking about running, Dad, if I could help, let me know. It's not my expertise. It's not something I really like, but whatever I can do, you're my father, whatever I can do. He's now testified for 20 hours or something, a massive amount of time. The Mueller report came out. That's the Bible. The Mueller report came out, and they said he did nothing wrong. My son is a good person. My son testified for hours and hours. My son was totally exonerated by Mueller, who, frankly, does not like Donald Trump, this Donald Trump. And frankly, for my son, after being exonerated, to now get a subpoena to go again and speak again after close to 20 hours of telling everybody that would listen about a nothing meeting, yeah, I'm pretty surprised.
All right, let's bring in our chief White House correspondent, Jonathan Karl, who is in the room. John, good to see you. So let's just get something straight. First, the Mueller report did not exonerate Donald Trump Jr. In fact,
or Donald Trump Sr.
Or Donald Trump Sr. But
yeah.
In fact, Mueller says he didn't actually even get a chance to talk to Donald Trump Jr., of all things. So sort of interesting there, but significant today that the Republican-led Intelligence Committee wants to talk to him. This isn't the Democrats.
Yeah, the chairman is Richard Burr, Republican of North Carolina. And I followed up on that question. I asked the president right after he was done with that, so are you saying that Don Jr. should not testify? And he wouldn't answer that question, but he reiterated that this caught him by surprise. Like, basically, what the hell do they want to talk to my son about?
What do you think they're going to do? What are you hearing about how they might play this with the committee?
Well, it remains to be seen, but they said point blank that they intend to subpoena him. They obviously want to talk to him about discrepancies between what he told the committee when he testified back in 2017 and what was revealed in the Mueller report. You point out that he did not voluntarily talk to the special counsel. The special counsel could have subpoenaed him. They decided not to, so they simply didn't talk to him. But he did talk, now it's like almost 2 years ago, talked to the Senate Intelligence Committee, and some of what he said about what he knew about the Trump Tower Moscow project, about what was going on in that, now infamous Trump Tower New York meeting.
Yeah, central figure.
Yeah, central figure, absolutely.
And what of this decision by the president to declare over the weekend that he does not think Bob Mueller himself, the man at the center of all this, who apparently wrote the Bible, should not speak publicly about the findings? The president first said, nah, maybe not. And then today he was asked again, and he's changed his tune.
I mean, Devin, you were there with me side by side in the White House for, that first year, almost 2 years of the Trump presidency.
Like 9 years.
And one of the things we would always debate is, what does a presidential Trump
What does it mean?
What does it mean? Is this a presidential statement, or is it just like a tweet? I mean, what is going on? And we would have this debate, and we would ask Sean Spicer about it, and he would say the tweet speaks for itself. Well, he tweeted that Barr should not testify. I mean, that Mueller should not testify. So that led our good folks over at the Justice Department to question the Justice Department folks. Well, is Barr going to take this as an order?
It could happen.
Well, yeah, and the answer answer that we've gotten, the guidance we've gotten, is that basically Barr's position has not changed. Barr has said publicly now at least twice that he has no problem with Mueller testifying, and unless the president directly issues some kind of an order, calls him up, says no way, he's not going to take a tweet as an order. Now you heard the president himself apparently no longer objecting.
Got to ask you about a couple of foreign policy headlines that came out of that. It was an extraordinary 45 minutes in there. You were the only TV reporter in there. The president made some news on Iran as he sends the aircraft carrier through the Suez Canal that arrived today in the region, the Bomber Task Force. The president said, you don't want to know the intel that I saw that led me to do that, which kind of perked ears. Also talked a little bit about war. But interesting, he says he wants to actually reach out to the regime.
I think this was the most interesting part of this, like you said, impromptu press conference. Steve Holland, a reporter for Reuters, started by asking about the intel that led him to send the carrier group over there, but then said, are we at risk of war? Could there be a war with Iran? And the president said, well, could be, but then immediately pivoted to what he wants is he wants to talk to the Iranians. He wants negotiations with the Iranians, just like he has had with Kim Jong-un. And then he went on this long attack on John Kerry for violating the Logan Act, which says private citizens can't interfere with U.S. foreign policy. And, because some conversations Kerry had now 18 months ago with the Iranian foreign minister. It was a fascinating detour, but he kept coming back to the idea that he wants to negotiate with the Iranians. And do you remember what happened to Barack Obama in the 2008 campaign?
I was just going to say, I mean,
when he floated the idea, when he was asked,
Republicans hammered him for wanting to talk to America's rivals. All right, finally, speaking of things he kept bringing up, is the Red Sox head to the White House today, and the manager, that's right, is not going to be there, Puerto Rican manager. The president was asked about all this, and he brought up Puerto Rico multiple times. So he did last night in his rally, too. Here's what the president said about Puerto Rico.
We gave Puerto Rico $91 billion for the hurricane. That's the largest amount of money ever given to any state. Talking about states in Puerto Rico, a little different. $91 billion. Texas got 30. Florida got 12. Puerto Rico got $91 billion. So I think the people of Puerto Rico should really like President Trump.
All right, the most money we've ever given to anybody. That's not exactly accurate.
No, Katrina was more. And by the way, it's not $91 million. Just so you know. I mean, I'm sorry, 90 million, that would be a bargain. This is a projection of what the ultimate cost would be 20 years out. It's nowhere near that. And even if it were $91 billion, that is not as much. We spent over $100 billion ultimately on Katrina. So need some fact checking there. But he's very defensive on Puerto Rico right now. But the Red Sox in town, and unfortunately, I mean, it's one of these terrible situations. You have the team coming, and it's basically only the white players on the team. It's
sort of a shame. But John Karl, thanks for being here. Thanks for your reporting and good questions in the Roosevelt Room. Moving on now to the deadly shooting this week out in Colorado, where the conversation has turned once again to gun violence and what laws might need to be passed to prevent future school shootings. At a memorial last night, I think we have some pictures, a group of students walked out at the vigil as organizers there began talking about what laws might be needed. The chance there of mental health. Well, a short time ago, I caught up with Congressman Jason Crow, a Democratic gun owner and an Army veteran who represents that district. Here's a little bit of that conversation.
This is very tough for the community. Whenever a tragic event like this happens, it's horrific for the families and the parents and the students involved. So it was very important that we went back and stood in solidarity to show support. But we unfortunately have a long history in our community of violence like this, from the Aurora Theater shooting to Columbine and now STEM school. It just underscores the need to do some common sense things to address it and also stand in support with the community at the same time.
Yeah, and why is it that your community has been hit with so many of these shootings? You call it a public health crisis, but what is it about that part of Colorado that has made this happen again and again?
You know, I wish I had the answer to that, and you know, there are no good answers to that question, unfortunately, and it's a question that's asked a lot, that I ask a lot, that my constituents are asking. We have, you know, borne a disproportionate burden of this public health crisis in our community, but I do know is that we need more data, we need more information, and that there's a lot of different aspects of this, from the mental health component to the school safety and resource component to the gun violence component. We need to be doing all of those and putting some resources and funding to all three of those areas to make sure that we're doing what's right for our children and securing our communities.
A really powerful vigil last night. It was neat to see those images of the community coming together. I know you were there. Michael Bennet was there. What did you make of that student walkout? Some students creating a scene, saying they felt like this was all being politicized.
Well, it was a very emotional night, which I completely understand. You know, these are students that had just gone through a horrific tragedy. They had been traumatized. So first and foremost, it was important that we be there for them. And it became apparent, you know, kind of halfway through the event that they weren't being given an opportunity to speak. So they stood up, as they should have, and demanded an opportunity to speak. And I supported that. I stayed late until every student was heard and had their opportunity to you know, tell us what they felt about this issue. And you know, just express that emotion. So it was really important that we keep the focus on the students.
There's some reporting coming out from the investigation, Congressman, that one of the private security guards at the school may have inadvertently fired at a sheriff's officer coming in. One of those bullets potentially even hit one of the students. Have you heard anything about that? Does that concern you? And what's your take on whether more armed guards should be placed at schools like those in your district?
Well, one thing I've learned about situations like this is it's really important that we take the time to gather the facts. You know, because these are tragic. There's a lot of misinformation sometimes about what's happening. We need to sometimes take a step back, take a breather, gather the facts and see what's happening. That's the job of law enforcement. So I don't like opining on speculation and reports on various things. We're going to see what the officials have to say, what the investigation uncovers, and then determine what policies and what steps need to be taken to prevent things like this from happening. You know, and I have two roles here. One is to support the community, and I do that, and I mourn and grieve as a father and as an elected official. And the second role is to take that step back and to look at what policy that we can pursue to prevent this from happening again.
Yeah, and I wanted to just finally ask you about the policy angle and all this. I know some see a rush to the discussion of gun control laws, but you actually introduced a new bill today that would address one of the loopholes in the law, at least as it pertains to purchasing long guns. Tell us a little bit about that and what else you think needs to be addressed in the coming days and weeks.
Well, there's certainly no rush to pursue legislation. Listen, we just celebrated the 20th anniversary of the Columbine shooting in our community just a few weeks ago, and we have yet again another mass shooting. So this is a problem that's gone on way too long. The question that I get over and over and over again from the people in my community is, what are you going to do? Why can't you stop this? What are you doing to stop it as a leader? We demand answers, and they should get answers. So we're going to pursue, and I'm going to pursue, you know, all reasonable legislation to impact this issue, including the bill that I'm proposing today to close a really important loophole on the background check system, because we have to make sure we're addressing the mental health component, the school safety component, and the gun component, all three of those, to actually start saving some lives here.
All right, our thanks again to Congressman Crow from Colorado. Shifting gears now to the sobering new number and measure of hate that's lurking in corners of this country. The FBI this week revealed a stunning new total of domestic terrorism investigations that are currently ongoing. Take a look at the numbers. 850 domestic terror investigations are underway right now. 40% of those, they say, that's the big number. 40% relate to anti-government, anti-authority sentiments. A significant majority of that are white nationalists and white supremacists, which is a really big deal. And the authorities say about 20% of field officers right now are handling these cases. A big problem. Our Justice reporter, Mike Levine, senior Justice reporter, is here. Mike, you've been tracking this trend for quite some time. The number today is really striking because it's significant to see that 40%, and most of that 40% is white supremacists and white nationalists.
Yeah, this is a clear and present danger, and the FBI yesterday, before lawmakers, made clear just how much of a threat this is. And the thing that really is striking here is that while the overall number of domestic terrorism investigations by the FBI has dropped recently, the number of cases targeting white supremacists and white nationalists is actually jumping.
So as a percentage of the current ongoing threat picture inside the country that the FBI is studying, the number by race-focused groups are going up.
Correct.
Wow. And what are they saying about how to prepare for these threats? Do you have a sense that the department is capable of monitoring all this? Are they ramping up resources? What are they doing?
You know, they really say that this is just like the international terrorism threat, that it's up to the public to help them get on to leads, to understand what's happening in communities. And if you see something, say something.
Important advice, Mike Levine. Thanks so much. It's not just the law enforcement community that's tracking this development. A lot of racial and religious minority communities in this country are rightfully concerned about this trend as well. We're joined now by two representatives from groups that are working to stem the tide of hate in this country. Sammy Rangel is the executive director of Life After Hate, an advocacy group aimed at curbing ideological violence through education, joins us now. Also, Keegan Hanks, a senior research analyst with the Southern Poverty Law Center, is here. Keegan, let's start with you. You track neo-Confederates, white nationalists, and these so-called alt-right groups. What have you found in your research? What concerns you most right now?
Well, what's most concerning is that in our most recent census of hate groups in this country, we found an all-time high. There are 1,020 active chapters of hate groups in this country, and that's the fourth consecutive year of increase.
The president, ABC News asked the president about this recently, and here's what he had to say.
We see today white nationalism as a rising threat around the world.
I don't really. I think it's a small group of people that have very, very serious problems. I guess if you look at what happened in New Zealand, perhaps that's a case. I don't know enough about it yet. They're just learning about the person and the people involved. But it's certainly a terrible thing, terrible thing.
Sammy, I want to bring you into this. To what extent do you think answers like that from the leaders of our government have an impact on how communities are feeling about this? Was that a troubling sentiment to hear from the president?
You know, anytime there's some sort of abdication from being responsible around how to address, you know, who and what are responsible for this growing plague of violence and violent far-right violence, it does, one, I think, perhaps give a false sense of security to people who aren't informed that maybe this isn't such a big deal when they should be very concerned. And two, I think it detracts from the seriousness that you know, our environments around these issues need to be heard and I think supported and prompted to stay engaged and to do something about it. You know, it's this undermines a lot of the efforts that good people in this country and around the world are trying to do, and it doesn't reflect the type of support that should match the level of threat that we're facing in this country.
Yeah, that's an interesting perspective for sure. Mike Levine just told us that the Trump administration is, at least the law enforcement side of things, is really focused on this right now. But Keegan, back to you. Do you have confidence, as you study these numbers and look at this trend, do you have confidence that our government right now is adequately postured to take this on as these numbers climb?
Well, it's certainly encouraging that there are this many active investigations, and it's important that we're talking about the threat that's coming from the white supremacist community. You know, we've seen in the last 6 months 3 attacks all across the world, places of worship, and targeted at that. And clearly, some of these perpetrators or suspects have been radicalized online because of white supremacist propaganda. What we do need is more information about what the government's doing about this. It's encouraging to hear that there are this many active investigations, but at the same time, without much more information, it's hard to know which part of the threat to address from various other perspectives.
And Sammy, Life After Hate has really been doing some groundbreaking work these past few years. What have you learned in the course of your advocacy about how all of us can create a more tolerant community and country?
Well, I think we have to, this isn't a battle that can be won, but it is certainly a battle that can be lost. And I think groups like ours and what the SPLC is doing and other groups, I think it's important that we insert narratives that help restore balance. And that help provide realistic perspectives. We don't need to exaggerate how serious this issue is. The level of threat that we're facing is real. When you look at the Global Terrorism Index, it points out that the increased capacity for violence has just grown exponentially just within the last few years. There were 20 terrorist attacks in the 13 years prior to 2014, and 61 attacks between 2014 and 17. There is exponential growth and there's exponential capacity for this type of violence. We have to educate the community at large, especially in the face of not feeling that there is consistency throughout the government and how they prioritize and how they rank and how they even classify some of these groups. I think part of the issue is that there are parts or branches of our government that aren't even willing to acknowledge that these are terror groups here in the U.S.
All right, Sammy Rangel, Executive Director of Life After Hate. Thank you so much, Sammy, for joining us. Also, Keegan Hanks, Senior Research Analyst with the Southern Poverty Law Center. Thank you both for that conversation, an important one we need to continue having in this country. Shifting gears now to the race for 2020, the presidential campaign getting a lot of attention out in California today, of all places. The state getting a lot of attention. The candidates competing with Senator Kamala Harris, of course, who's in the race there. California, if you didn't know, has moved up its primary for 2020 to March. It will get a lot more attention. In fact, early voting in California begins on the day of the Iowa caucus. So that state is very much in the crosshairs of the candidates. Our Molly Nagel is on the trail out there today. She's been tracking former Vice President Joe Biden, who's been out on the campaign trail. Molly, great to see you. So what's Joe Biden been up to, and what of these protests that he's been facing in California?
Well, Joe Biden has had 3 fundraisers out here in California over his 2-day swing here. He also did an event with Mayor Garcetti here in L.A. He went to a taco shop with him and ate tacos and talked to some constituents as well as reporters. Now, at 2 of his fundraisers, Biden did see protesters outside, but they weren't necessarily protesting the vice president. They were protesting people who were helping to throw the fundraisers for him. One was a healthcare group who wanted better wait times for patients for mental health care. They were seeing 6 to 8 week wait times for their patients for follow-up care. And they wanted one of the board members of Kaiser Permanente, who was throwing the fundraiser for Biden, to meet with her clinicians and come to a solution on that.
All right, so Joe Biden, fascinating though, Molly, to see the union candidate, pro-union candidate out there picketed by some of these union members, although not directly at him, but for the business interest that he was fundraising from. Molly Nagel, thanks so much. Much more reporting from you, I know. On the road, the president was out on the campaign trail last night as well, swinging at Joe Biden and also at a candidate that he has not name-checked before. Take a listen.
One of the Democrats today said that he, sleepy person, said that he heard from a lot of foreign leaders and they want him to be president. Of course they do. So they can continue to rip off the United States. Of course they do. Of course. I think if I heard that, I'd never vote for him. We have a young man, Buttigieg. Buttigieg. They say edge. He's got a great chance, doesn't he? He'll be great. He'll be great. Representing us against President Xi of China. That'll be great. That'll be great. I want to be in that room. I want to watch that one.
All right, and we're joined now here in studio with Beatrice Peterson. She's our Pete Buttigieg reporter. Beatrice, I mean, they must be loving, the campaign must be loving the fact that they are getting the attention from the President of the United States. That really elevates him.
You know, it makes a difference. I mean, when the President, comments on Mayor Pete, didn't pronounce his last name correct, Buttigieg, but it gives a little bit of a different element, I think, to the campaign. That's a great soundbite with President Trump.
It certainly does give him some attention and some stature. The President is now not paying attention. But you've done some new reporting today that I wanted to highlight here on one of the difficulties of Pete Buttigieg. You know, he came hot out of the gate, been getting a lot of attention, cover of Time magazine, very popular young guy in Democratic politics right now, and yet he's having a very hard time among minority voters. Tell us about what you've been finding.
Well, you know, he's gone on a lot of different television shows. He's been with the Breakfast Club, which is a very popular African-American urban television show. He's had dinner.
He's outwardly asking for help. Take a look at this quote. You were at this event. This is South Carolina. He says, I need your help. This is directly Pete Buttigieg to his supporters. I need your help to find people who perhaps do not look like you. You don't hear candidates say that.
Yeah, and in South Carolina, African-American voters make up 30% of the electorate, excuse me. Democrat, they vote overwhelmingly Democrat, and they're very important. I mean, he's gone to lunch with Al Sharpton. He's been at NAN for their convention. He knows that it's very important for him to reach African-American voters in South Carolina.
His crowds are heavily white.
You know, he had a crowd of about 600 people at an event in North Charleston. Unfortunately, the event was majority white, and he has to make that appeal. He said, I need help. And it's not something he's shying away from. It's something he's going towards.
Yeah, definitely something on his radar, but interesting to hear the candidate use those words. Beatrice Peterson, thanks so much. Great to see you. Your briefing room debut. Much more to come from the campaign trail for Beatrice. Finally today, we head to Capitol Hill for a bunch of very young app scientists. Yes, that's right. The phone apps, if you will. A bunch of young kids up there today showing off their wares for members of Congress. Our Lana Zak is reporting live now from Capitol Hill. She's been meeting some of these kids. Lana, tell us what this is all about.
You know, Devin, when was the last time that we were actually reporting from the Capitol and talking about bipartisanship? It's been a while, right? This is a truly bipartisan effort, House of Code as it's been called. It's the Congressional App Challenge, and it's bringing together hundreds of kids. 230 are here in our nation's capital right now with the different apps that they've created. Everything from helping autistic people better navigate social cues to lots of apps regarding safety. So take a listen.
The user interface is just a calculator, right? You type in your name, your calculator code, and your emergency contact's phone number. So my calculator code's 21, so it's just a regular calculator. So you could do 5 times 6, right? 30, yeah, 30. But once your calculator's output equals your calculator's code, it'll send a message to your emergency contact's phone. 20 plus 1.
And then I just got it.
Yeah.
It says, Elizabeth Saunders is in a situation and has requested for you to be contacted. Please contact them to ensure they're safe.
Yes.
So this is for safety, but
yeah,
it's incognito, so it can also be
for sure a little sneaky in there.
It comes to a point, like, because I have a nephew at home. He's 6 years old. I don't know if he's watching, but he really talks about, you know, like he's sometimes scared to go outside and go do things, and that really woke me up to the realization, you know, what do I want my kids to see?
So when you think about it, you kind of get surprised by how many people actually wanted to go to the challenge, and you know, maybe somebody else could have won instead of us.
So you're feeling humbled by that?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. And Devin, these are all teens. Those guys there, 16, 17, and 17 respectively. And they're actually creating apps. Amazon is going to help them make them commercially available where the students are interested in doing so. And in just about 30 seconds, they're going to start presenting these apps to members of Congress. Devin?
Well, that's pretty impressive. I don't know about you, Lana, but I wasn't designing apps when I was in middle school. So that hats off to those kids. Great to see you.
You waited until you were like 20?
Actually, I've never designed an app, let's be honest. Lana Zak, thank you so much. And thanks to all of you for joining us here in the briefing room on this Thursday. I'm Devin Dwyer in Washington. Hope you join us back here tomorrow, 3:30 Eastern Time on ABC News Live. Hope to see you then.